You did everything they told you to do. You finished school. You found a stable job. You accepted the offer because stability sounded like success. Age 24. £36,000 a year. A financial operations analyst in London. Monday mornings began with the same train. Platform 4. Coffee in a paper cup. Laptop bag over one shoulder. A quick glance at your banking app before walking into the office. Salary due Friday. Bills due Monday. Everything looked normal. Everyone around you was living the same story. Conversations drifted through lunch breaks. Mortgage rates. Holiday plans. Car finance. Promotions. Pension contributions. Nobody sounded worried. Nobody sounded wealthy either. Your parents smiled when you told them you had a permanent contract. You've made it. Those words stayed with you. So you kept following the map. You worked hard. You accepted overtime. You avoided unnecessary risks. You received small annual raises. £38,500. Then £41,200. Eventually £47,800. Every increase felt important. For about 2 weeks. Then life quietly absorbed it. Rent became a mortgage. The old hatchback became a financed SUV. The weekend takeaway became restaurant dinners. Streaming subscriptions multiplied. Insurance premiums climbed. Council tax increased. Energy prices shifted. You weren't irresponsible. You were simply normal. Your bank account reflected that. Friday afternoon felt rich. Tuesday morning felt ordinary. By Thursday evening, the number was already shrinking. Not because you were reckless. Because the system expected it. 20 years passed almost invisibly. At 44, your salary reached £72,000. On paper, you had doubled your income. Yet something refused to double. Peace. You still paused before unexpected expenses. You still waited for payday. You still calculated whether replacing the boiler should happen this year or next. That was the contradiction. You earned more than you ever imagined. But somehow, your money never seemed to arrive. Not really. It passed through you. Like water through a pipe. One evening, sitting alone at your kitchen table, you opened 20 years of bank statements. Thousands of transactions. Groceries. Fuel. Insurance. Coffee. Streaming. Car payments. Home improvements. Birthdays. Christmas. The numbers were enormous. Hundreds of thousands of pounds. You stared at the total. Then looked around your kitchen. The same table. The same chairs. The same worries. Where had it gone? That was the first time you noticed something nobody had ever explained. You weren't trapped because you spent too much. You were trapped because every financial rule you followed was designed to keep money moving. Never resting. Never multiplying. You gave the pattern a name. The paycheck loop. The loop didn't steal your income. It borrowed your future 1 month at a time. The frightening part wasn't that it existed. It was that almost everyone you knew lived inside it without ever seeing it. Then you remembered someone. Someone who had started exactly where you did. Someone whose story stopped making sense years ago. His name was Daniel. You met on your first day at the company. Same induction. Same desks. Same manager. Same salary. £36,000. Same age. 24. You even rented flats less than 2 streets apart. If someone had compared your lives back then, they would have assumed your futures would be identical. Instead, they slowly separated. Not because one of you earned more. Because one of you bought a different story. Daniel upgraded first. A newer Audi on finance. Leather seats. Digital dashboard. Everyone noticed. 3 years later came the luxury apartment. Open-plan kitchen. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Photos appeared on Instagram every weekend. Rooftop bars. City breaks. Designer trainers. New watches. People called him successful long before he became wealthy. Meanwhile, your car remained 5 years old. Your flat stayed modest. Your furniture didn't match. Your holidays happened every other year instead of every summer. When your salary increased by £300 a month after tax, £220 disappeared automatically. Not into spending. Into ownership. Index funds. Employer pension. A stocks and shares ISA. Eventually a small investment account that reached £15,000. Then £27,000. Then £49,000. Nothing looked different. Nobody complimented an ISA balance. Nobody admired automatic transfers. Nobody stopped you in the office to ask about your emergency fund. Invisible progress never receives applause. Sometimes you wondered if you were wrong. Especially on Friday evenings. Daniel arrived in a polished car. You arrived in one with a scratch near the rear door. Colleagues gathered around him. They asked about horsepower, not investment returns. They admired visible upgrades, not invisible ownership. For a while, it genuinely looked like he had won. And perhaps the hardest part wasn't resisting expensive purchases. It was resisting comparison. Comparison whispers a dangerous question. If you're making the right decisions, why does everyone else seem happier? That question followed you for years, until you discovered something strange. Money wasn't behaving like money. It was behaving like time. And once you understood that, every decision started looking different. Nobody teaches you that money has two completely different jobs. The first job is obvious. It pays. The second job stays invisible. It builds. Most people spend their entire lives asking money to perform only the first. Pay the mortgage. Pay the groceries. Pay the holiday. Pay the bills. Money becomes a delivery driver. Always arriving. Always leaving. Never staying long enough to learn your address. Then another possibility appears. What if some of your money never left? What if it started working while you slept? An investment account isn't really an account. It's a machine. Every contribution is another gear. Every month, another silent movement. You don't hear it. You don't celebrate it. But machines don't need applause. They only need time. Your emergency fund isn't savings. It's a wall. Storms still arrive. The wall simply decides how much damage reaches your home. Assets aren't possessions. They're employees. Some work nights. Some work weekends. Some continue working after you've forgotten they exist. Your salary? That's only an engine. Powerful. Useful. But an engine alone never reaches a destination. It needs direction. The strange part is that the financial system quietly encourages the opposite. Borrow before you build. Consume before you own. Upgrade before you compound. Because spending creates activity. Ownership creates silence. Silence rarely becomes advertising. Nobody runs television commercials celebrating patience. Nobody earns commission convincing you to keep the same sofa for another 6 years. The world constantly rewards visible movement. Compounding rewards stillness. That is why it feels unnatural. The transfer happened. Nobody noticed. Nothing changed. Except everything. Year after year, tiny decisions stacked like bricks. Not dramatic enough for conversation. Only strong enough to support an entirely different future. Still, the hardest chapter had not arrived. Because before invisible wealth becomes visible, it first becomes lonely. You're 38 now, then 40, then 42. Life settles into routines. Morning alarm, school run, work, emails, dinner, laundry, sleep, repeat. Your investment balance quietly crosses £118,000. Nobody knows. Your emergency fund reaches £24,000. Nobody asks. The mortgage principal finally begins shrinking faster than the interest. Nobody congratulates you. Daniel's life continues looking impressive. New kitchen renovation. Luxury holiday in Santorini. Promotion celebration at an expensive restaurant. His photos collect hundreds of likes. Your automatic investment confirmation arrives every month. No likes. No comments. No audience. Sometimes even you forget it's happening. There are evenings when you wonder whether discipline is simply another word for missing out. Friends discuss the newest electric SUV. You calculate whether increasing your monthly investment by another £150 is possible. They call you cautious, maybe even boring. They aren't trying to insult you. They're describing what invisible progress looks like from the outside. Average. Forgettable. Quiet. The years stretch on. Nothing spectacular happens. Which is exactly what makes most people quit. They mistake the absence of excitement for the absence of progress. But beneath the surface, roots are growing. A tree spends years becoming impossible to see. Then suddenly, impossible to ignore. You still can't see your own future. Not clearly, but something has changed inside you. You no longer measure wealth by what enters your driveway. You measure it by how long you could survive if life suddenly refused to cooperate. You don't know it yet. Life has already scheduled that test, and it arrives without warning. It begins on a Tuesday, 9:12 a.m. The meeting invitation appears. Mandatory attendance. Human resources included. The company announces restructuring. Departments merge. Roles disappear. Your position ends after 19 years. The room falls silent. Outside, traffic continues exactly as before. Inside, everything changes. People leave carrying cardboard boxes. Some stare at the floor. Others immediately open job websites. You call Daniel that evening. His voice sounds different. His company announced similar cuts. Neither of you expected this. For the first time in decades, both incomes stop. The difference appears almost immediately. Not in lifestyle. In pressure. Daniel calculates payments. Car finance. Personal loan. Credit cards. Higher mortgage. School fees. Every bill expects next month's salary to arrive. Without it, the structure begins trembling. Meanwhile, you make coffee. Open your spreadsheet. Emergency fund. £31,800. Investment portfolio. £267,000. Mortgage balance far lower than expected. You don't celebrate. You breathe. There is space. Not because you're richer, because your decisions purchase time. 3 months pass. Then 6. The markets fall. Ironically, your investments temporarily lose value. Yet emotionally, you remain calmer than you expected. Because wealth was never the number on the screen. It was the number of choices still available. You decline the first job offer. Not because you're arrogant. Because desperation isn't making the decision anymore. Choices. Money reveals its final purpose. Not status. Not luxury. Protection. Freedom from panic. Permission to think clearly while everyone else is forced to react. The crisis ends. But something inside you never returns to the way it was. You finally understand why the quiet years mattered. And why nobody noticed them. Years later, the answer waits in the smallest moment imaginable. It's another Tuesday morning. 25 years after your first commute. The kitchen looks familiar. The same wooden table. A repaired chair. The same ceramic mug you've used for nearly a decade. Outside, your car isn't new. It's simply paid for. The house isn't enormous. It's simply yours. Your phone vibrates. Not with anxiety. With options. A recruiter. A former colleague asking whether you'd consider consulting. Your investment account now stands at £714,000. Your mortgage is gone. Your annual spending is lower than it was 10 years ago. Not because life became smaller. Because it became intentional. You make breakfast slowly. There is no rush to impress anyone. You realize something almost impossible to explain. The greatest luxury isn't buying whatever you want. It's no longer organizing your life around the next payday. You think back to your 24-year-old self, standing on platform 4, coffee in one hand, laptop in the other, certain that earning more would solve everything. You wish you could tell that younger version only one thing. The salary was never the destination. It was only the fuel. Ownership was the journey. Time was the multiplier. And patience. Patience was the price almost nobody was willing to pay. The world never saw the transfers. The canceled purchases. The evenings you stayed home. The years you chose ownership over appearance. That was exactly why they worked. Because the loudest financial decisions are usually the least important. The quiet ones shape entire lives. You finish your coffee. Look out the window. Nothing extraordinary waits outside. Just another ordinary morning. Except this time, the morning belongs to you. And perhaps the real question was never how much money you could earn. Perhaps it was this. How much of your life were you unknowingly trading away before you finally learned the difference between making money and building freedom?